and welcome to Ivy English. I'm Karen.
And I'm Chris Gorski.
Today is June 18th, and today we're going to hear part one of a two-part article about something that we all have to make some decisions on every time we travel.
That's right. So today and tomorrow we have a two-part article on souvenirs. And as a matter of fact, earlier this year I went and visited family in the United States, and Taiwanese people kept asking me, what will you bring home to your family? Will you bring home local food? And I broke their hearts when I told them I won't bring them anything because my family is very traditional in the American sense. And even things like pineapple cakes, which are so innocuous.
Are they not big on pineapple cake? I thought everybody liked that.
I don't know how you could get sick of pineapple cake.
Really fast.
But who cannot at least enjoy one once a year?
Yeah.
And my family won't touch anything I bring. Last time I went to the United States, I brought a huge box of various goodies, the things that I thought were really delicious. My family wouldn't touch them. My niece's friends came over, and they're like, what is this? And they started eating it, and then my family started eating it.
I
know.
Needed the younger generation to kind of like show it wasn't poisonous? Or
I don't know. Because my family is like really traditional in American sense where they kind of, if it's not in America, it's kind of gross and weird.
I understand that. I gave a talk about my time here once, and then I shared with them these little glutinous rice cakes, and they did not go over well.
I purposely pick things that I'm like, there was like chocolate in it. There were British cookie, the digestive cookies that you can't really buy in the United States.
Right.
Things that are just plain delicious. No debate, and they wouldn't even try them.
They wouldn't even try it. If they don't try it, then there's nothing you can say. And by the way, digestive biscuits is the word for graham crackers.
I couldn't think of like what they were called. I just know the brand name.
Yeah,
they're hard to buy in America.
Right. But basically what the Brits call digestive biscuits, we call graham crackers. They're slightly different. Okay, our title, Keeping Traditions Alive with Local Souvenirs. So we're going to be talking about souvenirs, these things that you feel compelled to buy. Compelled to means you feel like you really should buy something to show that I have been to this place. Look, I traveled. So there are kind of some problems associated with this urge. And here we go with the first paragraph. Almost everyone who has visited a foreign country on vacation has purchased items to remember their trip. We sometimes buy gifts for others, but just as often, people buy things for themselves. The history of buying items to remember a place or experience stretches back thousands of years.
The word souvenir comes from French and means memory. It entered the English language in the late 1700s as a word for items that remind people of specific places or periods in the past. Of course, the tradition of collecting items from one's travels goes back much farther than that. Many wealthy travelers in the ancient world, whether from Egypt, Greece, or China, would collect unique and exotic items to share stories and impress people back home.
However, some of the first items that became popular with the masses were actually religious in nature. In the ancient world, pilgrims visiting holy sites would collect rocks or pieces of wood in hopes that the item would bring them blessings or good luck. Eventually, merchants at these sites realized lots of money could be made by offering small objects or trinkets to the passing pilgrims. In medieval Europe, visitors to famous cities or cathedrals would collect metal pendants or wood carvings of saints. This was somewhat similar to how tourists today collect keychains or fridge magnets from their vacations.
As industrialization changed society in the late 1800s and early 1900s, travel became increasingly accessible to greater numbers of people. Likewise, the mass production of items marketed specifically to tourists increased exponentially. While it's wonderful to have a special item that reminds you of a pleasant trip, unfortunately, the rise in consumer tourism has created a few problems.
And the article leaves us hanging here. What are the problems? We won't find out till tomorrow, so make sure that you tune in for part 2 tomorrow. So let's go back to the beginning of part 1, keeping traditions alive with local souvenirs. So souvenirs are these objects that we buy when we travel to try and remember a place, and then they will kind of remind us often of traditions, of old traditions, things that are special about a place. Our first sentence, Almost everyone who has visited a foreign country on vacation has purchased items to remember their trip. Now, I'm thinking back on one of my first memories of somebody bringing back a souvenir from a foreign country. When I was in grade school, I went to Campfire Girls, and our leader went to Japan. And when she came back, she was telling us all kinds of things about Japan. And one of the things I remember was stoop toilets.
Oh, fascinating. Yeah.
Because I had never heard of them, and it was new for her, too. So she described in great detail how to use a squat toilet, and we all thought it was kind of funny. She also brought back these long, sort of like rubber slippers. I guess they were Chinese style, so she had also gone to China. And she brought back these little wooden dolls with bobbly heads from Japan. And so that was like my first impression of souvenirs, was these bobbly head dolls from Japan and also these slippers, these rubber slippers from China.
That's a fascinating story because there's so much context of why this memory impresses upon you, why these items, and why this person. I bet you could really go deep on this.
Yeah, that's right. And then for me, those dolls just represented Japan from then on.
Let me see. I remember during the first Iraq War in 1991, the man downstairs was a soldier, and he came back with American products sold in Iraq when he was on combat.
Oh.
And so I remember he brought back specifically this mini can of Orange Crush. I had never seen a can of Orange Crush, such a small can of soda pop in my life. And it was an American flavor, but it had the Arabic writing on it. And to me, I was really fascinated that here was this thing. And I remember he kept it for himself, but he gave it to me. He's like, if you really want it, you could keep it. And I thought that was really kind of this guy that just got done, just lighting it up. He shared his war stories, which are probably a little bit more gruesome than your campfire stories.
I will imagine. That's right. And that reminds me of another memory. I went to Mexico. It was the first time I was outside of the U.S. I brought back an empty can of Campbell's sopa de pollo. It was Campbell's chicken cream soup.
That's funny.
Because it was just so neat to see the label, such a familiar label in another language. That's why I thought of it from your story.
I agree. That when you were thinking of that, I was like, oh, yeah, what's my first souvenir memory, right? I bet this is a great discussion question for anybody listening on YouTube. If you have specific first souvenir memories, write those down for us. I love to read those things. I always enjoy seeing the way people interact and share their memories. Or just ask someone in your classroom or whoever you're with, what is your souvenir memory?
But there's something deeper here is we kind of want to show off to everybody, I have been to this exotic place. Look at this thing. It's a kind of an ego thing.
Yeah, I suppose so.
Okay, our next sentence. We sometimes buy gifts for others, but just as often, people buy things for themselves. Now, this thing is so unusual, and you want to have something that shows you have gone to this very special, exotic place, so you will buy something that people may ask about when they see it in your cabinet at home. As you get older, though, you find out you have no more room in your cabinet for that stuff.
Yeah. I decided a long time ago that anywhere I go, I would get a postcard as a memory, because postcards are very thin, stackable, and you can make them into nice collages to hang tastefully in your house if you want to. They're discreet. Put them on your fridge, put them in a box.
I did that too. And recently, I sold some off at a flea market.
Oh,
so even postcards, they filled up a drawer that I decided I didn't want so full. Whatever you buy. So my mother-in-law went through the same thing. She would buy things and bring them back and distribute them. She says, I'm not buying any more stuff. So she would show us her photos, and she said, I'm not taking any more pictures either.
Stuff is such a good word for it, too, because stuff has less value than things or items.
That's right. And so she even stopped taking pictures. So actually, it's kind of an encouragement to live in the moment. All right, our next sentence. The history of buying items to remember a place or experience stretches back thousands of years. That's not something we just thought of recently. Humans have been doing this for thousands of years, and we have records of it.
Yeah, that's true. In fact, when people initially would visit the pyramids in Egypt, they would chip off little pieces. The Romans were really big fans of writing their names wherever they went. Kind of a little bit like Kilroy was here. That began after World War II. Americans would write Kilroy was here everywhere they went. The Romans were very famous for this. And anywhere you go in the ancient world, if you have a person that's versed in Latin, you'll see like, yo, Latin bro is here, and and they'll like write the year. It's very similar to what a teenager would do today.
There is a book about this by an American author in which he complains about this very bad habit. It's Mark Twain, and he wrote The Innocents Abroad.
I did not know this.
I listened to this book on audio, and he describes about how all these people on this cruise that they went on, they visited many countries, including Russia and also Rome and all these other places. Pieces is what I'm going to say. All these other places. And he would complain about how everybody would do what you just described. They would take off a piece of a monument or a building, just sort of like a vanity thing. I have been to ancient Rome. And that actually it destroys the stuff. And it's a really, really bad habit. You should not do that.
I agree with absolute sincerity here. Don't take anything from that place like that. We'll get more into specifics later when we get to the third paragraph.
And it's just going to be clutter when you go home.
Okay, let's go to our next paragraph. The word souvenir comes from French and means memory.
That's very straightforward. And then I think in Taiwan, people often see omiyage. They see it in Japanese.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah,
I never really noticed this. Mm-hmm. This word was first recorded in only 1775. There were ideas and the ideas of going to a place and buying gifts before this, but I could not find what they would call these words. They might just be like, we bought some stuff.
Okay.
It entered the English language in the late 1700s as a word for items that remind people of specific places or periods in the past.
That is extremely straightforward. So as long as you understand all the words in this sentence, it should be no problem.
Of course, the tradition of collecting items from one's travels goes back much farther than that.
As Chris has already mentioned.
Many wealthy travelers in the ancient world, whether from Egypt, Greece, or China, would collect unique and exotic items to share stories and impress people back home.
So that is the thinking behind it. They see something really unusual. They want to bring a piece of this exotic country back home with them.
Let's get bloody and gruesome. People did not just take stones or items or slices of wood that we'll see a little bit later. When there were executions of famous criminals, people would dip their strips of cloth into the blood of the beheaded.
That is really awful. That is so gruesome.
Let's keep going. The last queen of France, Marie Antoinette, was killed in 1793, and when she was killed, people, of course, really wanted her blood. But worse than that, just before she stepped up for her execution, the man that was going to pull the lever, he cut off her hair and kept it himself. So he would parade the hair of Marie Antoinette as his souvenir.
Wow. Yeah, I know people were very angry at her. So seeing this would sort of be like, I'm going to get revenge on you even if you're dead.
Yeah.
All right. However, some of the first items that became popular with the masses were actually religious in nature. This is not at all surprising because people would often go on what were called pilgrimages. They would go walk a very, very long way to visit a special religious, like a church or a relic or something else, to show your devotion to your God.
Much of the travel that would take place in the Middle Ages, that's after the fall of Rome, around like the end of the Han Dynasty, to the Renaissance in the 1500s, almost all travel had to be religious in nature. There weren't a lot of places to go, and if you were going anywhere, generally, if it wasn't religious in nature, people were very suspicious of you. That's not to say travel didn't exist. It was just not like anything like today.
And if you want to dig into English literature a bit, then read Geoffrey Chaucer's.
Yeah, that's right, the Canterbury Tales. That's right.
Canterbury Tales. And they are really pretty wild and actually pretty sexy in parts.
Yeah. They were bored during the plague. The word mass, we're going to see several times across the next few days. Pay attention to the various meanings of mass that we will see across these two articles. So the masses here just means the regular people around. This is not the wealthy. This is not the most exclusive people. These are just regular people walking around.
The ordinary people. In the ancient world, pilgrims visiting holy sites would collect rocks or pieces of wood in hopes that the item would bring them blessings or good luck. They would think it maybe had healing powers or whatever it is, that it would bring them good luck.
Pilgrim is the Latin word for foreigner.
Wow, that's good to know. Okay, next sentence. Eventually, merchants at these sites realized lots of money could be made by offering small objects or trinkets to the passing pilgrims. So capitalism sprang up very, very fast as soon as they saw that, people are willing to pay for this stuff. And they would sell often a lot of junk of not much value.
Children love trinkets, just like I explained earlier on that I was fascinated by this empty can of soda pop from the other side of the planet. It was a piece of garbage, and I was really fascinated to look at it and study it and look at the shape of the letters and read the back and what could I understand, what I couldn't understand. A trinket is a small item or a piece of jewelry with little or no value.
Okay. In medieval Europe, visitors to famous cities or cathedrals would collect metal pendants or wood carvings of saints. This still goes on, and it goes on in Asia all over the place, too.
So medieval Europe is the same as the Middle Ages that I explained at the top of this paragraph.
Okay. This was somewhat similar to how tourists today collect keychains or fridge magnets from their vacations. Now, on vacations that I've been on, often with groups, we will always be approached by a lot of peddlers, and then they will say that, well, this is a genuine relic or whatever it is, and it's all fake.
It's all fake.
It's all fake, and everybody is warned, but people still buy it.
One thing I would suggest not to do, if you go to the tropical area, you could buy some trinket, some tatty piece of garbage, or maybe you get something natural, and people think of this as like a really nice thing. Okay, I'll bring you a seashell or a dried up starfish from some beautiful beach that we visited to in some beautiful place. Those shells are homes to many critters that need them. Hermit crabs are very important for those type of ecosystems, and people have stripped the shells away. Hermit crabs do not grow their own shells. They need their own shells, and so they've begun living in plastic, which is really heartbreaking to see, these creatures needing to live in garbage because we've taken away their habitat. Don't take the shells.
Like a Dixie cup. If you go down south to Xiaoliuqiu, sorry, that must be allowed, we are not allowed to pick up anything now. You are not allowed to take any stones or shells or anything now.
Bravo. I'm 100% on board. Let's go to our final paragraph. As industrialization changed society in the late 1800s and early 1900s, travel became increasingly accessible to greater numbers of people.
With more people traveling, that means there is going to be more plundering of places they visit.
At this period of time, most people, the masses, were not able to travel. However, there was one exception, and that was the honeymoon. And this is the period of time right after you get married, and that oftentimes, for many regular people, would be the only time they do any type of significant travel anywhere, especially outside of the country. At this particular time, this is when Niagara Falls was at its peak. And this was like the place to go if you lived anywhere on the east coast of the United States for your honeymoon.
That was a cliche. That's just something you do. You get married, you go to Niagara Falls. Right? I was just going to say, it's a great place to visit.
Yeah, I was a tour guide there. Go for 2 days. Go for 2 days. If you stay for a week, you'll get bored. Yeah, you'll get tired of it.
Okay.
Let's go to our second. Don't tell the Niagara Falls Tourism Board I said that.
I just remember getting rained on. They gave us these raincoats and rain hats, very thick rubber that had a smell to them. And then you actually go on a boat under the falls and you get rained on.
If you have a chance to go, it is a once-in-a-lifetime kind of trip. There are many fun things to do. Most of the attractions are worth the money, and I do encourage you to go on them. Even though I was a tour guide and had to go on many of them as part of my job, I thoroughly enjoyed almost all of them every single time. You can't spend forever there.
Yeah. And you meet interesting people there.
You do. In fact, the last time I was in the United States, I went to Niagara Falls, and I saw a family. They asked me if I could take a picture of them, and I said, yes, if you tell me where they were from. They were from Taipei.
There you go.
And we had just such a fun little mini reunion.
How nice.
All right, our next sentence, likewise, the mass production of items marketed specifically to tourists increased exponentially.
Well, this happens within a country as well. So I recently went to Uluanbi and to Maobitou. And, of course, they had a lot of shops selling things, mostly from Thailand.
So mass production, here's the second instance of this word mass. This means production just for everybody. This is something that everybody of every financial level can get. It's a consumer good that you could get at any store.
And it doesn't really have anything to do with the place you're visiting.
It's a trinket. It's a trinket. I just thought of another tourist story about Niagara Falls. Let me take a mini aside here. When people initially visited Niagara Falls in the 1800s and the early 1900s, people realized that they could make a profit off this. So they weren't selling souvenirs. They put up big wooden walls that you couldn't see over. And they would drill holes in the wall. And you had to pay to look at Niagara Falls.
Oh, for crying out loud. Very enterprising.
Can you imagine taking your honeymoon to Niagara Falls and instead there's all these walls that you got to like peer through with your eyeballs? Just miserable people.
I had that experience on my recent trip, actually. This because they had a lake that was a protected area. So they had a fence around it. You just couldn't walk over to the lake because they were protecting the wildlife there. So I had to look through holes.
That is a little different than saying, because they're protecting it, this was strictly for financial gain.
Yeah.
This was strictly for financial gain.
Okay.
While it's wonderful to have a special item that reminds you of a pleasant trip, unfortunately, the rise in consumer tourism has created a few problems.
And that's our cliffhanger. We're going to have to wait till tomorrow to hear what the problems are, but I think we've already touched on some of them.
That's right. Now, Karen, I have a question for you. I want you to rank your best souvenirs and what you think are the worst souvenirs.
When I travel, I usually have a goal of buying a musical instrument from that country. So I have a sitar at home. I have a dutar from Xinjiang. I have flutes from Georgia. I have all kinds of musical instruments from all of the countries, almost all the countries I've traveled to. I really treasure those.
That's wonderful. My brother traveled to South Africa, and he brought me like a small, I can't remember what it's called, kalimba?
Yes.
And he brought me one of those, and maybe it's not an authentic one, but I did really enjoy playing with a kalimba, and it was just so musical and just this little thing that you can keep on your desk. To me, that was a really good souvenir. I agree. This is a really interesting idea.
I have an mbira that comes from Zimbabwe. I didn't travel there, but I needed something called a deze. It's a gourd they use as a resonator.
Oh, yes.
And I found one in South Africa, so that's what I brought back.
What about your worst souvenirs? Do you have anything like if someone hands it to you, like, what am I going to do with this?
I think I've thrown all of them out. I can't even remember. Just junk, sort of like some lovers love Hawaii or something like that. Silly stuff like that.
Yeah. I agree. Key rings. Key rings are up there for things I just don't want.
I've given those away.
Kids, in my classroom, I display some of my various Mario toys and collectibles that I've gathered over the years, things that have certain meaning to me. And kids see that, and so they know that I care about this. And so when they travel abroad, or as of recent times, the little claw game machines have a Mario keychain in them.
Oh.
And in my classroom, I literally have a hook of like 10 of these suckers.
Oh, my goodness.
And
you like them.
The kids bring them, and I want to value what they bring to me. It's never something I would have purchased myself.
Yeah.
But they spent their time and thought of me, so I display it. But I literally have just this like hook full of them.
Many symbols of affection.
Yes, I agree. That's how I see it. Okay, and maybe this one is a little controversial. I do not want a coffee mug. I have my coffee mug sitting right next to me. I like the mugs I have. I have this cute one with my cats all printed on it. If you hand me one from some goofy place you went to, it's not more meaningful to me than my cat one. I'm sorry. Thank you for the gift. I don't know what I'm going to do with this.
I have been downsizing for many years now, and now I'm really being very harsh about downsizing. I got rid of almost all my mugs years ago.
Food is a great gift to your teacher. If you want to give your teacher a gift, bring them some special food, dried fruit or something.
That's edible, and that's not full of preservatives. Okay, that's all we have for you for today. We're going to continue our article tomorrow. Tune in then. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.